In Ecuador, the Citizen Revolution Party won in the main provinces and cities in Sunday's local elections. Meanwhile, in the referendum promoted by President Lasso, the no option continues to lead the vote count. In Peru, protests against Dina Boluarte's government continue. The Ayacucho region began on Monday an indefinite strike with the participation of several social sectors. And the governments of Turkey and Syria continue search and rescue efforts after the 7.8 magnitude earthquake that affected both nations, leaving more than 2,300 people dead and over 12,500 injured. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In Ecuador, the Citizen Revolution won Sunday's sectional elections in the main provinces and cities, while the no option continues to lead in the referendum promoted by President Lasso. The results published by electoral authorities indicate that the revolutionary civic candidates have won their prefecture of the province of Pichincha and the mayoralty of the capital, Quito, while they are leading in several localities. Regarding the referendum, the count indicates a possible victory for the no in all the questions, thus contradicting previous polls that showed the yes option promoted by the Ecuadorian president. At the same time, experts say that Sunday's vote is an indication of the lack of popular support for the political forces in power in the run-up to 2025 presidential elections. In Haiti, nearly 50 bus passengers were kidnapped in the Artibonite department, allegedly by the Cocorat Sangra gang. Bus Owners and Drivers Association President Mehu Chanjou said that the incident took place Saturday in Liancourt, northwest of the capital, the same area where in late January 6 policemen were killed by gangs, an incident that sparked violent protests by the guild. According to the trade unionists, members of armed groups hijacked two buses, one belonging to the Patriot Coast Line Company, which was running from Port-au-Paix to Port-au-Prince, and another from the capital to Saint Marc. By now, almost 100 people have been kidnapped in Haiti so far this year, but the police says it is overwhelmed by the spiral of violence sweeping the country, which has also affected its agents. Venezuela's Attorney General Tarek William Saab will visit Cuba as of February 9th, where he will carry out a work agenda. According to Venezuela news agency, Saab will strengthen the ties between the Venezuelan Public Prosecutor's Office and Cuban judicial and cultural organizations. His agenda includes a meeting with the intellectual and president of the House of the Americas, Abel Prieto, and with national and international press media. The head of the prosecutor's office will also give a lecture at the University of Havana on the history of human rights in Venezuela and in the world. William Saab, who is also a poet, will present two of his most recent books published by Montavila Editores, Hoguera de una adolescencia intemporal and En un paisaje boreal. In Brazil, members of the Rio de Janeiro Rescuers and Firefighters Group continue the search for 6 people missing after the sinking of a boat in Guanabara Bay on Sunday. The operation is concentrated around Paqueta Island, 17 kilometers off the coast where the boat sank, with 12 people on board, 6 of whom have already been rescued. Witnesses said that the boat, presumably a fishing boat, rolled over when it was hit by waves up to 2 meters high caused by strong winds. The fire department says 2 helicopters and numerous boats and jet skis have joined the search. Former Congresswoman Joenia Wapichana took office as president of the National Foundation for Indigenous Peoples, an organization in charge of protecting Brazil's indigenous peoples.
Because the National Foundation for Indigenous Peoples is full of lawsuits for omissions and negligence. But now, we're going to reverse this role, because instead of the FUNAI persecuting the employees, instead of closing the door to the indigenous peoples, the FUNAI has to be on the side of the indigenous people. It has to be supporting them. It has to go to court not to accuse, but to protect. It is our priority for the National Foundation for Indigenous Peoples to resume the demarcation process of the indigenous lands, to do the protection, inspection, removal of minors, because they are killing our children, killing them, sexually abusing them, giving them alcohol and drugging them.
In Peru, protests against the government of Dina Boluarte continue. This Monday, the region of Ayacucho started an indefinite strike with the participation of several social sectors. The event takes place more than a month after the resumption of protests in the country against Dina Boluarte's government. 22 people were preventively arrested and another 27 were sentenced for alleged acts of vandalism. Social movements affirmed that the ruling confirmed the worsening of judicial persecution against popular protests in the country. Peru's government declared a state of emergency in 7 regions amid uneasing protests demanding the resignation of President-designate Dina Boluarte. In the regions of Madre de Dios, Cusco, Puno, Apurimac, Arequipa, Moquegua, and Tacna, the measure will be enforced for 60 days. This decree comes at a time when a total of 26 people have been arrested in Saturday's protests, while 24 others have been injured following repression by police during the protests in Lima. During the state of emergency, constitutional rights relating to freedom of transit through national territory, freedom of assembly, and personal security are restricted or suspended. The norm also stipulates that, with the exception of the Department of Puno, where the armed forces are responsible for internal control, the Peruvian National Police, with the support of the armed forces, will maintain internal order. Let us take a short break, but first remember you can follow us on TikTok at the account at teleSUR English, in which you'll be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and much more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back from the south. In Turkey, the death toll after a powerful 7.8 magnitude earthquake rose to 1,762. Authorities registered over 12,600 injured. Furthermore, authorities informed that an aftershock was registered at 1 p.m. local time, which worsened the situation in more than 10 provinces of the country. Several officials and international organizations expressed their solidarity with the catastrophe and said they intended to provide aid in the most affected areas. The Turkey Disaster and Emergency Management Authority reported that more than 2,800 buildings collapsed, which could represent an increase in the number of victims. Meanwhile, the Syrian Health Ministry announced that the number of deaths after the earthquake stands at more than 656, while over 1,400 people were injured in the various provinces affected. Health authorities warned that these figures could rise in the coming hours and added that 4 truckloads of medicine, surgical, and emergency supplies were sent to Aleppo, Latakia, and Hama. They also noted that the Health Ministry's emergency room is assessing the situation instantly and preventively and is coordinating the ongoing response in the various governorates. Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan decreed 7 days of national mourning on Monday following the devastating earthquake. The head of state explained that during this week and until February 12, the national flag will fly at half-mast in Turkish territory and at diplomatic headquarters abroad. In Syria, the Aleppo citadel, a World Heritage Site, was damaged after the 7.8 magnitude earthquake struck several border provinces. Parts of the mill, defense walls of the northeastern part of the Great Medieval Palace, and most of the dome of a mosque collapsed. The monumental city of Palmyra in the Syrian province of Homs was also affected by the quake. The minaret of a large mosque fell completely. Local media added that historic buildings and private houses in Aleppo, Hama, and Tartus were also affected by the tremor. On Monday, Russia sent its rescuers to Syria to help overcome the consequences of the deadly earthquake that struck Turkey and Syria. In a telephone call, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad gratefully accepted the proposal of his counterpart Vladimir Putin to send Russian troops to Syrian territory to provide support in the face of the natural disaster. Shortly after the conversation, the Russian Ministry of Defense reported that more than 300 military personnel had begun to provide assistance in the areas most affected by the earthquake. Humanitarian aid distribution points, including food and basic necessities, were set up in 6 locations, including Aleppo, Latakia, and Hama. Also, during a telephone conversation with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Vladimir Putin reiterated his readiness to provide the necessary assistance to his Turkish partners to mitigate the consequences of the devastating earthquakes. The Turkish president thanked his Russian counterpart for his solidarity, specifying that he will send instructions to the relevant departments of his nation to accept the help provided by the rescuers sent by Moscow. The United Nations is fully committed to supporting the response to the earthquake that struck southern Turkey and northern Syria, according to a statement from Secretary General Antonio Guterres released on Monday. The text regrets their loss of life caused by the incident as the numbers continue to rise as rescue efforts progress. According to the statement, UN teams are supporting on the ground, assessing needs and providing assistance. The earthquake claimed more than 2,000 lives in Turkey and Syria, sources in those countries reported so far. The numbers could rise in the coming hours because of the large number of people still trapped in the rubble. As part of the solidarity shown by the international community after the severe earthquake that hit Turkey and Syria, UN President Miguel Díaz-Canel Bermúdez expressed his deepest condolences to the Turkish and Syrian people and governments for the loss of life, injuries and infrastructure damage caused by the quake. President Díaz-Canel added the island's willingness to help in taking care of the victims. The death toll in Chile as a result of the forest fires in the center-south zone of the country rose to 26 as the flames continue to spread in the forests of the areas. According to the latest report issued by the National Service for Disaster Prevention and Response of the death, some 18 victims correspond to the Biobío region, although 7 victims have also been registered in Araucanía and 1 in Ñuble. Authorities have promised to prosecute those directly or indirectly responsible for the fires, and so far 12 people have been arrested with sentences ranging from 5 to 20 years in prison. Chile has registered around 280 fires that have destroyed at least 280,000 hectares of forest throughout the country, while firefighters are trying to put them out with the help of other Latin American nations. In Bolivia on Monday, the Vice Minister of Civil Defense said that at least 1 person has been killed and 3,400 families have been affected by the weekend rains. The heavy rains affected mostly La Paz and the Santa Cruz regions. The executive has sent aid consisting of food supplies and tents to La Paz, while in Santa Cruz assistance was provided with heavy machinery to channel water from crop fields. In this regard, emergency services are assisting the most affected municipalities and are alerting the regions that may suffer disasters and overflows due to the heavy rains. We have more news coming up after a final short break, so don't go away. Welcome back from the South. On Monday, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned of the strong possibility that the conflict in Ukraine may continue to escalate. Guterres insisted on the need to achieve peace in line with the UN Charter and international law between Russia and Ukraine. He recalled that experts who have been updating the famous end of the world clock for the past 75 years believe the planet has never been as close to self-destruction as it is today. Guterres said that it is time to put arms control back at the center of the debate, reducing the strategic threat of nuclear weapons and working towards their elimination. Ukrainian forces used chemical weapons along the Soledar and Artyomovsk areas in the Donetsk People's Republic. According to Yan Gagin, an advisor to the head of the Donetsk People's Republic, said unit commanders reported that Kiev used chemical weapons along several front lines, but mostly in the Soledar and Artyomovsk ones. They added some fighters experienced severe dizziness, nausea and vomiting as a consequence of the chemical attacks. Gagin pointed out that Ukraine had used chemical weapons before, but this time they sprayed the chemicals from special containers installed on drones. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Mao Ning said on Monday that her nation will work with its BRICS partners to strengthen cooperation with other emerging markets and developing countries and promote BRICS membership expansion.
Denies Washington's accusations of spying as mistrust deepens.
On our aviators who did it, and we'll have more to report on this a little later. Thank you.
Mr. President, what does it say about China? What's your message to China? You were saying the recommendation was from your national security.
I told them to shoot it down.
On Wednesday.
On Wednesday.
But the recommendation.
First tracked over the Aleutian Islands near Alaska and traveled through Western Canada and into the U.S. state of hovering over the skies of the United States.
Storm, Beijing denies Washington's.
Tensions prevailed on Monday in the French National Assembly at the beginning of the discussions on the pension reform promoted by the government and the interruption for minutes due to lack of order in the hemicycle. The debate, scheduled until February 17th, turned out to be controversial since only one of the motions presented by the opposition could be voted on. The draw decided that it would be that of the extreme right, with its call for a referendum on the project, and the most repudiated point was that of the extension of the retirement age from 60 to 64 years old. The defense of the text was made by the Minister of Labor, Olivier Dussopt, who reiterated that the reform is indispensable in view of the deficit of the retirement system. Parliamentarians of the left-wing bloc expressed their discomfort with the project, described as unfair and unnecessary. On January 19th and 31st, more than 2 million French people, according to unions, marched against the project, with new calls for protests on Tuesday and Saturday. In the United Kingdom, health workers launched a new strike this Monday. Unions expect this to be the biggest strike in decades. 750,000 nursing and ambulance workers are in a wage dispute and announced the unwillingness of the Rishi Sunak government to reach an agreement. 100 days of the Rishi Sunak government have passed, and there's been no quote-unquote honeymoon, because last Friday there was another railway strike and there are another 14 forces measures on the part of the workers scheduled for this month of February. India unveiled on Monday its largest helicopter factory, which can turn out at least 1,000 aircrafts a year. After the inauguration, Prime Minister Narendra Modi said the new helicopter facility will fulfill the government's pledge to gradually reduce New Delhi's dependence on foreign countries for its defense needs. India is one of the largest arms importers in the world, and even with its recent push towards local defense production, still relies heavily on hardware from Russia, its largest and oldest military supplier. The transitional military government in Mali has given the head of the Human Rights Division of the UN mission in Mali 48 hours to leave the country. The decision to declare Guillaume Ngefa Atonodok persona non grata followed an address to a UN meeting in which he accused members of the Russian military group Wagner, authorized to operate in the country by the military cabinet, of serious human rights violations. The Malian Foreign Ministry pointed out that the measure follows the destabilizing and subversive actions of Mr. Andali, who arrogates to himself the right to decide who are the representatives of civil society and ignores the authorities and national institutions. The communication adds that Andali's partiality was most evident during the last UN Security Council review of Mali. We have come to the end of this news briefing. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.